Hello there folks, this is Ferenc on board again, this time with a video on one of the ideas that I feel somewhat about science and why, for one or multiple reasons, I do not trust science that much. Okay, this is part of a, let's call this a personal belief set in a way, so don't hurry to take this like, for granted. Take it more like as a pamphlet if you're definitely interested in pulling this video down. So ever since I was young, I came in this world with, well, I had the great feeling of aversion towards concepts or literally anything that would bind me or, make me have to abide to certain beliefs. Okay, later on I found out that, well, much later on I found out that a belief in the end is nothing else than a set of ideas that someone accepts without a necessity for belief. This is called also acquiescence, which means accepting without fighting. And we can actually say that to most people this is something quite simple. Now science is this, how I call it, this mega construct, of let's call it like a huge library that literally makes all and each of your wishes somewhat come true, because everyone is, especially as a child, we are very curious and we are interested in gaining a lot of knowledge, especially with the impulse of control that we subconsciously gain from our surrounding, from our parents, from literally everything. This idea of control makes you want things fast, and the problem is that when you want things fast, you're kind of self-sabotaging yourself because your discernment is kind of fading, especially when you can get things so fast. Now, the point with science is that, well, science is represented by humans. It is not represented by aliens or higher technology, okay? At least not that we know. And, well, it is not represented by things that we can 100% trust, that come from a simple single or multiple sources that we can actually fully and like 100% trust. Okay, now the point for this is, like, you see, science comes with all that juicy details. Okay, and even if I had this impulse of like staying away from concepts, that didn't prevent me from like devouring hundreds of documentaries when I was young, probably even more. Like everything that was on Discovery and Animal Planet, at a certain time I almost knew it by heart. I would watch most of those documentaries on like literally everything about the animals, the old Discovery. Before some changes happened, I never was curious to find out what, but those old documentaries were suddenly replaced with others, but due to school I no longer had that much time to stay and watch them. Okay, so as a programming, when you start to grow as a child, this curiosity of yours starts becoming faded. It starts withering, because you're gonna get into a, well, let's say, type of prison. Okay, people call it school, but I call it more like a prison, in which you will be taught to surrender your discerning mind, and also you will be taught to comply. School usually teaches children how to compete for a stupid marking system, and you kind of create the future little sociopaths, because school also induces a lot of traumas. Children actually suffer a lot because of low marks. Their parents will scold them if they ever get low marks, because parents basically don't do anything else than what happened to them, probably in a much worse version, because once you induce a lot of suffering into a person whose mind is not that broad and whose awareness is low enough, they will feel entitled to apply that much, at least that much trauma onto others, while of course still functioning at a low level of a so-called protection. In the end, parents want to protect, but no one told them what protection actually is. So you see, they created their own sense of protection, which tells me that when you say a certain concept like protection, literally everyone understands it differently, although in the dictionary it stands for the same definition. So wouldn't you agree then that science is also something highly subjective instead of the objective part that it should? Now let's think about this. Science is done, okay, performed, and all the application is done by people, okay, and machines, let's say, but ever since the beginning it was done by people. Now we know that through history there have been burning of big libraries because for some reason certain knowledge was to be disallowed from the public because it would probably mingle with the project of life. Life means, living against yourself and a set of programmings that you get, so that at a higher level, beyond this physicality, your higher self actually experiences through this physical body, which in the end kind of no one ends up liking or taking too much care of. It's the same principle as in video games. No one cares about their characters because if you die you simply respawn. And no one knows if that body actually suffers some pain when, well, they are completely disconnected from that game. No one knows if that bunch of pixels and, image file, 3D image file, that is taken from a set of files in the game and, graphically rendered by different processes within the threads of the game. No one knows if that body is actually taking some specific damage because, well, programming is kind of just like reality, and, well, our reality also has its own programming, which of course is much more advanced. Now with science nowadays it is done and, performed by people. But those people actually are people who work in a job. It is their job, but not only that, it is actually a job. So basically they go into a job and they do their research. Okay? Now consider that this job is basically a job like yours. They go for at least 8 hours because most likely they might spend even more time. And since school, most of these people are taught to be, enthusiasts. And when people have low self-esteem, literally everything becomes possible. In case of people with low self-esteem, they will do literally everything. They will probably invent an own character in the prison of their own mind, and they will do literally everything to fulfill that specified character. So for example, if you give how it has been since nowadays, people would believe that, you have to go to school, you have to go through multiple school levels, and, you must go to work, and you will be fulfilled by the time you end up retiring because you will have so much money. But people didn't understand that that money you would have just because you were taught to also save money. So by the end, they wouldn't have money because of having worked, but more like for preserving that mentality of poverty, which they transmitted further and further. And not to forget that, for example, the European thinking and American one as well, being so ingrained with the idea of nothingness, okay, because you are a nothing in the so-called invented eyes of God. Now the point is, suddenly all the literacy in Europe was faced with the principle that you can basically have access to literally everything. Well, everything that is thrown at you and, certain forces allow. So science in the end is given for free, but the question is how much of it is actually really true. Because if you are not very literate, chances are you won't be using your discerning mind that much. You won't be questioning things, you will just be accepting them. And these people will pull down anyone else who will literally try to think for themselves, because it is the programming of such low people. They will simply pull you down because they will fight for literally any idea that they hold true, because it's what they perceive, okay, so it's a perception, it's a belief, what they believe to be true to them. Your beliefs create your reality. And considering that most people don't do anything than just go to work and come back and go to the local supermarket and come back, their awareness over the world doesn't expand most likely beyond their, beyond their hometown, okay, or the town where they moved most likely, and the area that they, commute to and back, okay. So these people are also people who work in scientific jobs, most likely. And of course, I don't know how scientific that is, but statistics say that up to 90% of humanity doesn't enjoy their jobs. It's like, who would actually enjoy working for a job, especially nowadays when people are becoming more and more aware? Okay, like jobs were another way of being imprisoned to this, but again, at a higher level, they were most likely necessary because, well, we wouldn't actually, you know, get to learn a lot of the lower vibes of this universe. Now, the point with science is that again you have these people going to a job most likely they don't like, but they finish something science related and they are still following that, broken child vision, okay, because now their inner child is most likely broken because school kind of cuts your visions, okay? School says that if you don't do things like this, you get a bad mark. Like I know that especially from my country, Romania, where when you learn English by the same old ancient rules of English, in which if you don't follow those, like I'm sure most of those don't even exist in England anymore, or in the global English. It's like you are taught, for example, that you must use structures like you know what were those, like hardly have I, when, and no sooner with then, okay? And even in the national exams, if you use them otherwise, those people will actually tell you that it is wrong. I mean, British people don't give a fuck on this, and they use it as they can because in the end both mean the same thing, exactly the same thing. In this case, they're not close, they are very close synonyms. They're not even close synonyms, they are actually pure synonyms, okay? They are like entire synonyms. You don't have to use them the specific way that manuals teach you, because usually when you learn a new language, a manual, okay, is nothing else but a dead language. If you learn French like the way we do in schools, like, and you then go into France, they'll most likely they'll look at you like, I don't know, you've come out from a time portal and you're speaking the French of, I don't know, 200 years ago. It's that bad in times, okay? Like the languages that you can learn are dead languages already, because languages are a live organism. They develop, okay? Even illiterate people aid at the development of languages, because some languages can be like stupidly intricate, okay? And back then there were rigorous rules of how to pronounce it, because you had to have some structure, okay? You had to make sure that everyone speaks the same language so that you get understood. But then you get a lot of differences, like for example in Romania we have a lot of local differences, okay? Like in the Moldovan part of the north, east and east, well, people speak with a certain accent. If you go into the western part in Transylvania and Banat, well, both have their own ways of speaking. If you go into Oltenia, you'll have a different way of speaking, okay? And it's mostly the same Romanian, except they also have their own local words, okay? Because Romania has been quite fractured for a very, very long time, and well, it's not the only case. Like even in Germany, you have so many local, let's say, sub-languages, okay? They're still German, but they sound very different, and at times even local people may not understand one another that easily. Even in Japan, for example, I heard you have two, let's say, Japanese languages in a way, in which one of the parts of Japan speaks kind of the same Japanese, but they use a much harsher accent, and it results in different pronunciations. Now with science again, now that we can figure that most of the scientists, if not all, work in a stupid, boring job, it's like you would understand that such of these scientists come back home after 40 years, they're finally or almost gonna get retired, and they're kind of starting by the age of 50 or 60 to realize that, hey, like my whole life was a joke, was a sham, more or less. Like what have I been doing, and all the regrets start piling up. More so than that, they were promised that they will definitely find a result for something that most likely they were studying in their laboratories, and like it was more like a dead end probably ever since they even started. And probably some of their colleagues are like more or less victorious or something. They probably achieved something and they didn't. And the way I can imagine this is that people have this great sense of lying themselves, because it is much easier to invent a reality than simply accept reality. And you can imagine someone that they would say, hey, you know what, at least I invented this, okay, and that invention is not necessarily something real, but you know. Now the part with science is that you have so many things that are palpable, okay? You can't lie about computers. I mean, you don't know what lies within them, but when you turn it on, you see that it actually works. So I'm not saying that all science is fake, but like most of the ideas that they present is, well, somewhat debatable, not, like fully, like fully stomp on it and say, okay, all of it is fake, okay? But considering that we know only like 10% of the depths and, well, width and dimension of our planet, physically speaking at least, okay? We only know that much, and thinking that we don't even know how our brain works, okay? And we hear all these super complex and intricate details about psychiatry and psychology, and sociopathy is this specifically and psychopathy is that specifically. Dude, nothing that regards life is fixed in stone. If you haven't understood this, don't put it into science, because the problem is most people will believe. I mean, come again, it probably might still be part of the, the higher necessary plan, but come again, it's high time people actually start reclaiming their minds, okay? Now, this video is not about stomping on science, okay? Don't get me wrong, but you have to start using your discerning mind. Like, how much do we actually know about space? Well, I don't know, literally nothing. It's like we most likely barely stepped on the moon. I'm sure there are some cities on Mars as well. I mean, why not? It could just be possible. When I was young and I saw Stargate, I wouldn't see that as a movie. Like, I instinctively saw that as possible documentaries. Just because we don't have on the news, people presented as going from one system to another and doing, like alien negotiations and the such. It just doesn't necessarily mean that it's not existent, okay? It's like suddenly it's like 100 years ago we were so primitive, okay? Like, we barely started the industrial age, and it's like, what the fuck? It's like 100 years later we actually invented flying machines, okay? We like literally bent physics to the knees, and it's like we claimed most of what we could. We invented metal that it's like heavy as a mountain, but it floats on waters, okay? We invented metal that goes like low within the seas, okay? We have invented flying metal, okay? We have invented the first types of aircraft, okay? We invented aircraft with turrets, okay? Like a machine that flies and can also shoot back and can also carry deadly bombs at the same time. It's like 4 engines keep that thing like flying. Like, that's definitely something that you cannot like fight against, okay? That's scientifically proven, and most of us have used a plane by now, I guess, or at least we know that planes actually exist. Now, the point with science is that when it starts speaking to you about the universe, it's like, dude, like, don't you think that I should just trust a set of telescopes? It's like, that's not palpable proof enough for me. Like, how about we actually study our own planet? We don't know shit about it, and, well, except from laying waste to it, it's like, I don't know much about this planet, and science is nothing else than a kind of religion in a way. If you don't believe it, more or less, like, it's not that much restrictive as a religion used to be. The point with science is that, well, that's actually the problem, because if you don't believe it, you're kind of a heretic, especially to the lower vibrational humans, who will definitely fight to keep that the way it is, because they wouldn't want to fight towards a different, most likely brighter possible future. So, with knowing so little about ourselves, science does nothing else than, having us externalize ourselves, and, we keep getting the idea that we need to seek our power and, imagination and all sorts of ideas outside. Now, this is just an introductory video to why I kind of dislike science. I will probably debate on this some other time. Well, leave in the comments what you think about this. Feel free to share, and, well, like and subscribe if you want, but at least share, so that we can actually help humanity expand their own consciousnesses and do this together, because, well, it is much more satisfying when you get people together, and I'm not doing this for the satisfaction, because I know that everything will happen in divine order. Now, take more care of yourselves. Don't forget to become more introspective. The truth has been with you all along. Well, Ferenc on board signing out.